Hi, I'm Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to GameKeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then, buddy, you are in the right place. Join the GameKeeper crew direct from Mossy Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and, of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
We're live in 3, 2, 1.
All right, thank you, Richie, and welcome everybody to West Point, Mississippi. We got an excited crowd here. I'm looking at Lanny. He's got a twinkle in his eye. He's been cleaning up the building all
I'm telling you, spring time. We are already getting ready for turkey season. So
spring cleaning.
At the end of deer season, you got to get all your stuff in order. You know what I mean? So you can jump back in the spring.
I think I moved into my house here, my new house in Starkville 7 or 8 years ago, and there's still boxes. And
let me come over.
Lanny just completely changed this building in like 4 hours.
No, it's been 3 days.
Well,
I've been wide open for 3 days.
It takes a lot to change Dudley, though. I mean, you know, but look, the spring cleaning, it looks good. I'm glad that you got excited.
Didn't somebody call it the Camo Cave? Have you heard that?
No, I have not heard that. That's Cuz's thing.
It's Camo Cave.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the mole hole.
I know
we're in the bowels of the mole hole, as I like to refer to it. So Dudley, you look kind of tired, if I'm being honest here.
He's living his best life.
Well, it might be all the weight that's been melting off of me from my keto that I've been doing since January 1st.
Yeah.
He's taking it to the limit.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. So it's working?
It's working.
Yeah. Who's the doctor you're working with?
Oh, of course, Dr. Ned Miller.
Who killed the biggest bull elk of the
That's
season.
a giant bull.
Yeah.
It was a giant bull.
This is
deserving.
Yeah. This is the last ditch effort to figure out my no sleeping problem. And it seems to be working.
So he thinks it's diet
He
related?
thinks it's like carbs and sugars. Yep.
Golly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've always
And
heard
alcohol.
I've always heard that the best remedy for lack of sleep and pregnancy prevention was hard work.
I don't know where you're going with that.
Well, I'm just saying, if you do a lot of manual labor, you're so tired,
Yeah.
you're gonna sleep,
Yeah, this is
Okay.
true.
and you're probably not gonna get pregnant either.
Yeah, I know I probably won't get pregnant, so we're good there.
Well, okay. Well,
Always goes back to that for some reason.
Well, look, all right. So you guys, you've been taking your youngins hunting. What's been going on real quick? So we're supposed to call Dr. Marcus Lashley. We're going to talk fire. I'm trying to get ready to call him. Toxie wants to join us. Nobody burns more than Toxie.
Loves it.
Oh,
He's
my
a
gosh.
pyromaniac.
I'm waiting on his text to say he's sitting still so we can call him. So
he's not sitting still.
yes. I mean, have you ever seen him sit still? So that's what we're doing. So in the meantime, I'm going to ask you, what have y'all been doing with your youngins?
We've been doing more kind of soccer stuff and things like that. Not as much hunting, but getting out. Did a little bit of 4-wheeler riding, a little bit of target practice. Just trying to make it fun.
Yeah.
We're taking a step back
Hey.
from walking straight to a shooting house, and that really didn't seem to be working well. So,
Well,
Other
good.
outdoor activities.
yeah, just doing different things, going on little day hikes, things like that.
So Lanny, the Hayden looks like he's just wearing
I'm
them
kind of
out.
at the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah, you're like
Hayden has hit his stride. Logan's interested in being at deer camp all the time. So I've actually, I was telling somebody the other day, I love waterfowl. It's just, I think I talk like a duck and walk like a duck and everything else. So I love waterfowl, and I have yet to go duck hunting this year. Because of the deer hunting bug that Hayden's got. So it's been fun. He's also following his father's footsteps, and the most defining factor of the season has been, Dad, I think I'm a meat hunter. There's no doubt about that. Anyway, we've had fun.
He needs lots of nozzler ammunition, I would expect.
Yeah. And he did. I'm proud of him. Of course, I'm talking a bunch about my kid.
Yeah.
But this year he got to put some work in, put some time in, and then kind of see the fruits of his labor. So
Yeah, he's a good kid.
Cool. Yeah.
neat.
Yeah. And Logan's the same way. He's not into the shooting part yet. He likes his bow and kicking it at the camp, and those kind of things. So it's
Kicking
been
it.
kicking it at the camp. That's because this is a group of kids that we travel down there with. So
Sure.
including Jason and Jess and all of them. So
Well, when I look at the blood on the biologic, I think there's so much going on. It's hard to call out a few things, but there's a little post on Mossy Oak.
Yeah.
That
It touched your heart. I know it touched
it
your
was
heart.
a really, really sweet little post by a little girl, Blake
Blake's
Hamilton.
little girl.
Yeah, Rivers.
All Rivers.
And
yeah.
I was when I was made aware of it last night,
Right.
my daughter was showing it to me, and it made her cry.
Was that
It
why
was
she
her-
crying, or is that because she's reached her deer limit?
Yeah, that's probably why she was crying, because she doesn't have any more deer to kill. But this little girl, Rivers, handled it. She was just a priceless little reaction.
It
so
was.
I would
No
encourage
doubt.
people to go to Mossy Oak Facebook, or probably on
Check 'em
Instagram
out.
too, so and watch that. But that was really good. Toxie's killed a deer this week. We'll ask him
Sure
about
did.
that, and Mr. Fox killed a deer. So,
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to ask him about that one as well. So I think I just got cleared for you to call
Am I
Toxie.
calling?
So yeah. So
I got his number.
all right.
What is his number?
Good afternoon.
Well, there he is. That
There you
just
go.
happened.
Yeah.
No, there was no ringing or anything.
Well, I talked to him a lot.
I'm clairvoyant. You know that.
Okay. All right. Well, Toxie, it's great for you to join us. We're just kind of getting started here. We were talking about blood on the biologic, and this episode, obviously being about burning, we couldn't do it without you. You're the biggest
power of it.
pyromaniac I know.
Yeah, I mean, just talk to me like I'm in the room, Bobby. You're talking to me like I'm some kind of guest from out of town with all that, extra energy and stuff. And it's like I'm the same old grudgy neighbor you have every day down the hall.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we wish you could be here, but we're glad you're here via the telephone.
You're excited to hear from me, I guess, because I've been in hiding for a week or so. But I mean, as it just gets out there, the coronavirus has rolled through our entire family just about. Thank goodness we've been able to protect my mom and dad. But other than that, I don't think anybody's been immune. I have not tested positive. Somehow I feel like I've had a mild case maybe, but I have isolated. And the great thing about isolated and not being very sick, I escaped to secure an undisclosed location over in Alabama and had a little success, so that was fun.
Well, I think
Good
I
for
saw
you.
a picture of you with a deer. Bo killed a giant deer.
That's
Giant. It was a great fun experience.
There you go.
I would
Big,
guess you're
mature, good old deer. He definitely had the record brow times for anything I've ever killed.
Yeah, you did.
I would think your batting average is pretty good considering you've probably been mainly just slipping around squirrel hunting and putting other people out all season. So that's a pretty good
Well,
accomplishment.
that's kind of dully, but yeah, I hadn't really shot anything till this week, and I killed a doe and a buck, and so that was good.
Well, I tell you what.
Anytime, I mean, I love big bucks and big horns and, a trophy and all that. I mean, I do love it. It's exhilarating, whatever, but my base joy is just running air through one like you're supposed to. That's fun. And I mean, kind of got it from good old Bob Dixon, God rest his soul. He always really loved running air through something with a big body buck or something. And so that was fun. And then lay my hands on him, make a good shot. That was, the older you get, the more you'll appreciate it. I can promise you that.
It was a great deer. So
Yeah.
congratulations on that. But what we'd really like to hear about is last week we did a podcast and we said, hey, Toxie's not here because he's taking Mr. Fox. Could you tell us about that afternoon?
You talking about batting averages, Dudley. That's his second time to go all year. He's really struggled with being able to, have enough energy to, even get out and get in the car, but he kind of talked about it, and then he gets where he's not feeling good, so and he talked himself out of it. But I saw the temperature was going to rise up, and we've had cameras out checking them, and there's one of those, y'all know the place, I won't call it, but there's a lot of clover. We planted probably I've been crowing about this all fall. The best investment I've made on my properties in the last years has been 100% above anything else, non-typical clover. And we planted about, 30 acres worth in some of those big fields on this place. And this year I didn't. I'm not trying to cheat us out of any seed sales, but I didn't plant a thing. I sprayed it, and then when we got ready for fall, we just fertilized it with a good clover formula, and it just, it lasted all summer, exploded, and it is ridiculous how many deer are out there. And it just occurred to me, over anything else we sell, or maybe anybody else, is that is given. Your critters have to get up and eat every day. And I know we plant beans, or we plant corn, or we plant brassicas, or radishes, or, but those only have a window, and those are great, but there's nothing as a baseline of having a great, year-over-year stand of clover, especially one as nutritious and as vigorous growing as the non-typical. And I'm telling you, I'm getting as much in the ground still at this late date. We're late planting some, but that place has got so many deer on it, and it has been without fail clover on it for 15, 16 months straight now.
This has
all
been
spring, all summer, all fall. It's crazy the difference in the deer, the amount of deer, the health of the deer. Anyway, I won't go on and on about it, but it is, in my humble opinion, the best product that we have. I know we got a lot of great products, but if people out there can do it and they have it, I will say it will last longer through our summers in a clay soil than a sandy soil. That I've experienced, because that clay soil will retain that moisture better. But I've got some places going on 5 years just like that now. But clearly, Mr. Fox killed that deer. It was a beautiful 11 point, and it was in a big field of non-typical clover.
This really has been a good year for clover too. I mean, it has the absolute perfect conditions for clover.
So let's go. I want to go back to his buck, but how did the hunt roll out? And the pictures I saw, he looked so excited.
You had, Bobby, you had made arrangements for me to have a really nice shooting house. You can talk about it if you want.
Yeah, the redneck, yeah.
And we put it somewhere specifically for him and kind of saved it for if he could go. And it was just like he went, he had his little bag he takes, and Mama had a Ziploc of cut up apples and some muffins she made for him and some other snacks and bottle of water. She saves the old bottle and fills them with water for a water bottle. And so she had his whole snack thing prepared for him. So he was all business, and he was comfortable, and, it was a warmer afternoon, but deer started moving, and I saw one buck. I almost let him shoot. It was a 7 point. Probably needs to be killed, but he wasn't real low. But I was thinking, I don't care what my dad shoots. And he was like, nah, let's wait, And so this deer came out, and I studied him. It's like, that's a great deer, genetically, but I swear, first of all, I think he's pretty old. And second of all, I could care less. My 91-year-old dad, and he's got to look at him, and he's like, yeah, but the deer, it was like 300 yards, and I was like, you don't need to try that shot. And he just started feeding closer and closer and closer. He really had never even, almost didn't pick his head up. He was just steady wearing that clover out, and he got about 125 yards and finally got broadside.
Oh, my goodness.
And, as feeble as he is and as tough as he has and stuff, he had it cap around backwards, and he was all business. And when I said, take your time, when you're boom, and then you better have your fingers in your ears when you tell him to shoot. And I thought he hit the deer, but it was walking off, and then for about 10 seconds walking off, and I was like, man, my heart sank. Man, they don't do that when you hit them. It just all of a sudden, out of the blue, the deer just took off running like someone's taking with a cattle prod. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? I bet he hit that deer pretty good. And all of a sudden, the deer felt like, he felt the throes of losing it. And sure enough, I waited about 30 minutes, and I eased down there where the deer went out of the field, and I found a little blood, and I turned my light up to go start trailing. There he was laying right there.
I'll be.
And he center punched him right in the shoulder.
Everybody loves
so anyway, it was
on the board.
That's just so cool.
Yeah.
What was cool about it is I called my mom so she wouldn't worry about it. She worries to death about him. If we're 5 minutes late, I called Diane, let her know I'm gonna be late. I'm tracking a deer for Daddy. I'm gonna, let him sit there for 30 minutes and while I look for him. And then so Daddy, he got all his stuff out, and Mom had brought him, and he had water bottle, and he ate muffins, and actually she had made like 4 muffins. So there was 1 muffin for him and 1 for me and 2 for me to take home for like Diane to have. And by the time I got back from looking for the deer, he'd eaten like all but 1 of the muffins. He'd eaten all his apple. He'd eaten the banana, and he was just as comfortable. And, usually he's kind of itching to get on back and get on home. And he was just the moon was out, and it was just, it was a very comfortable day. We had a great evening together. It'll be, one of those things. Awesome. It was just one of those things. God smiled on him, and it was a beautiful, super chocolate horn, dark deer. Probably, I'm going to say he was a 5 or 6 year old deer.
Oh my goodness. What a beautiful deer, and just a
great.
Yeah. Oh, it was. And I think that food is just running out all over the place in this late winter. And we're just, I'm looking at the trail cam pictures I'm getting out there, and it's just more and more and more deer. In fact, just lately, some more bucks I hadn't seen all year. So it just tells you what you can do. The great thing about clover is they eat it and it comes back, and they eat it and it comes back, and they eat it and it comes back, and it just keeps on feeding them.
Well, look, that's a great story. And I think we're probably going to have some more questions for you after, but we need to call Marcus Lashley. He's going to be wondering why we hadn't called him. So if you don't mind, Toxie, I'm going to get Lanny to call, and you should be able to hear everything.
Welcome to Verizon Wireless. Your call cannot be completed as dialed.
Okay. All right, Richie now.
I love Mr. Fox's hunting sack. It was sitting in Vandy's office. It's an old white canvas.
Welcome to Verizon Wireless.
Y'all didn't blow the horn for me.
There you go.
Welcome to Verizon Wireless. Your call cannot be completed as dialed.
Okay, let's call Toxie.
I've got Toxie.
You got Toxie.
Okay, all right. 3.
Got him.
Hello?
Marcus Lashley. Can you hear me?
How's it going?
Well, I don't know.
I can hear you this time.
I think we made it.
I'm not sure how it's going, Marcus. It's been a challenge to make the phones work today.
Yeah, that's interesting. The last time it rang, I couldn't hear anything.
Well, look, I apologize. We're late calling you, but we are so excited to have Dr. Marcus Lashley.
Oh, yeah.
He's Dr. Disturbance. This guy is a pyromaniac from way back, and we've enjoyed having you. But here on the podcast, Marcus, and we know a lot of the same people. Everybody just says a lot of nice things about you. On the phone with us also is Toxie. Now he's a pyromaniac himself, and we couldn't do a burning podcast without him.
Marcus is a pyroscientist and researcher and very, very knowledgeable. I am a pyromaniac.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, I certainly appreciate the introduction and the kind words, and I'll say that I think I also identify as a pyromaniac as well, but I do some science on it.
And just a plain old maniac, I think.
Yeah.
Everybody loves a good
love
fire.
hunting. Yeah. I love hunting and fishing, and fire helps you do some of that sometimes. So,
well, Marcus,
or at least enjoy the spoils.
The only reason I'm on the phone is because we don't have conditions to burn today. Otherwise, let's do it without me.
Oh, we could have had some good footage if it was a good burn day.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, Marcus, it happens every year. We have great burn days in December, January, and I just don't get off my duster and go do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just hunting season still, and you find an excuse. And then, we roll around here in late January, 1st of February, and schedule a lot of it, and you can't find a good day. Either it never dries out, or, we have to have perfect wind conditions with the roads around and stuff. So It is what it is.
Yeah. Well, I think that's something that sneaks up on a lot of folks. The burn window seems like it's wide open, and we're going to plan it all in a couple month window, and then you realize you had you get 2 or 3 good burn days during that 2 month window.
It's
gets
just
difficult to get it all done.
Yeah, it's a busy time of year too. With just different things going on other than what we like to do outside.
So, Marcus, what we wanted to do is we wanted to do it to kind of steer this thing around educating people about prescribed fires and why you do it, when you do it, conditions you look for, the equipment that they're going to need. We're just going to ask some basic questions. So if a guy had a lease or has his own property, and we're going to encourage them to learn why they need to burn. And that's what we'd like for you to kind of just kick this thing off with your thoughts on the importance of burning.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start. Fire is a really effective and it can be really cheap management tool to enhance habitat for the wildlife species that we all know and love and pursue. And I think for that reason, it's a really important one for folks, especially in the South, to learn about. The reason it's so important is because historically in our systems, especially the pine systems, the open pine systems in the South, but also in the upland hardwoods and certainly in the prairie, it has been a primary force in those systems. And a lot of the wildlife species and the plant species in those have adaptations that benefit from having fire around, and in some cases even promote fire being around. So if you really want to get down to it and why you want to burn, I think folks really need to sit down and think about what do they want to get from it. What is your objective? What are you interested in improving deer forage? Or are you interested in improving fawn survival? Or is your focus on nesting hens? Them being successful. Do you want to hear bobwhites or have a huntable population of bobwhites? Those kinds of questions are the first things that people really need to think about in detail, and it can change the planning process and how you're actually going to apply fire on the landscape.
Hey, this is Bobby Cole. One of my favorite things to do as a gamekeeper is planting food plots for my deer. My OnX app helps me to determine the exact plot size to make sure I'm applying the right rate of biologic seed and fertilizer. Try it out for yourself and see. Use coupon code MossyOak to save 20% on your subscription to OnX. What would you say is the vast majority of people what's their reasoning for burning, Marcus?
Well, the people that I come in contact with that are burning, the majority of the burning that's being done, I guess, of land managers that I come in contact with, they're generally burning for quail. If folks want quail and they want a huntable population, then you can't have it without that, unless you're just releasing pen-raised birds to hunt. So in terms of a wild population, that is the quintessential fire-dependent species. If we take fire out of the system, we don't have quail. So that is very common, but it's not common across a wide range, because there's only a few places where we still have a holdout where there's a lot of quail. A lot of Florida, has populations of quail, but particularly the red hills, starts in the Panhandle and goes up north into southwest Georgia. There's still a stronghold and open pine there where fire has been a part of that landscape continuously all the way up until now. Right. And there's still really good wild quail numbers there. There's a couple of places that you might find them in the prairie region where you guys are at, the Black Belt through Alabama and Mississippi, but they're less common. And of course, you'll hear or have a few quail here and there that have been maintained through forest disturbance across the landscape. But the decline in fire has been one major problem for that species. So, of course, if you get out into the west, quail populations are variable across that landscape, and there are certainly some places that have still really good populations. But when the people that are using fire most actively are those that are really keen on having huntable populations of wild quail. So the people that contact me mostly that are interested in starting to use fire, or they're using it some and they just want to enhance the use, they are people generally that want more deer and turkeys. So both species I get contacted commonly about. And in general, those people either haven't used fire, but they're interested, or they're using it some and they just want to take it to another level, as opposed to the quail community where they had to have been using fire, or they wouldn't have any quail to begin with. So kind of a different place where they're at.
Toxie, when you burn, what in your mind, what are you burning for?
I primarily turkey poult.
Turkey poult,
favorable. Yeah. I mean, and honestly, you want the best spring habitat for all of them to have better hunting potentially. Obviously, if you have, and Marcus backed that up, if you have a preferred nesting area, especially year over year over time, then you tend to attract hens to that. Especially, I think if they've been successful, they tend to kind of go back to that. And so if you attract them, you're going to attract the gobblers too. And for me, I guess my biggest reason is I kind of live in fear and anticipation both of having a good hatch. Because, I say it all the time, people talk about it. I just remember like when the kids were little and then I traveled and hunted, and I said, Dad, what's the best state to turkey hunt in? Is it Kansas? Is it Texas? Is it Missouri? Where is it? I said, there's no one state, son. And they kind of look at me, no, I thought it was like some magical state where it was so much better. I said, it's a place-to-place thing. Let me just tell you this. You can have the most heralded, super, put up on a pedestal, big lodge, tons of land, historic turkey place in America. And if you don't have good hatches, it's going to stink. If you have just a piece of scrubby old cutover, cheap lease from a timber company, and you hatch a bunch of turkeys, you're going to have marvelous turkey hunting. It's that simple. I mean, if you don't hatch them, it's going downhill and soon. And so it all revolves around, Dr. Hurst is the one that taught me too, the mortality of a 1.5-year-old buck to become a, say, 5-year-old is, I don't know, like 30-40%. Than just natural mortality of my whitetail. So, but the mortality is what he described to me, Marcus, of a Jake. No, excuse me. The mortality of a 14 days old hope that has just learned to fly to become a 2-year-old, which is what you're after. That's big enough to harvest and hunt. The mortality rate's like 2 or 3 or 4%, something like that. Yeah. So my point, if you can just, deer management and getting them to that age, and then you've got also the cross factor of like genetics at that age and, what's a shooter and all that stuff. If you raise a turkey and he's a 2-year-old long beard and he's gobbling and strutting, that's your trophy. We're not managing to get 12-inch beards or something. So I'm just kind of in a roundabout way getting to the point that if you can hatch them and get them to 14 days old, you have pretty much won the battle. Deer management is fairly more complicated to get what you're after.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think a good thing to emphasize with what you were just saying is that first 2 weeks of life, the hen obviously has to hatch the eggs, but the mortality of the nest is not as important as once those things have hatched and they're little bumblebees for that first, especially 10 days of life. Those things, they have almost no chance of surviving even when everything is great. I mean, it's just, they're just made to die. And that's where the bottleneck is on populations a lot of times, is when they are really young after they've hatched. And we've kind of moved past, that the hen, if she lost her nest, especially early, she has the opportunity to re-nest and can do that. But once they've hatched, we're kind of all in on that one. And the mortality rate when they're in that first couple of weeks of life is just, it's abysmal, even when things are really good. So I think that that's a good point. That's somewhere that everybody, if you're trying to manage for turkeys, you can make a big impact. Is even a few percent change in poult survival is substantial, cumulatively for the population.
Well, like
absolutely. I mean, you look at the numbers. If we're and I'm just going back on the days of Dr. Hurst, he was saying, and that's kind of the worst I've heard, but he used to quote, if we're lucky, 2% of the eggs laid will actually make it to be like a 2-year-old gobbler. 2%, if we're lucky. Mm-hmm. And so, look at you. If you say, it sounds like that's not much, but you save 2 of those, and that's 4%, you've doubled.
Yeah.
You've doubled the output just by 2%,
Yeah, you're exactly right. And, let's think about also what that means for that little bitty turkey. We're trying to get a particular type of vegetation structure where we're talking about below knee height. Essentially, they need a lot of bare ground that they can run around, and then the vegetation that's up about knee tall is providing overhead cover to keep them from being vulnerable to predators or exposure. That's something that people probably don't think about as much, but it doesn't take that much exposure to temperature or wind or whatever, but before that thing's really vulnerable. So that type of vegetation structure is critical. And that's provided in a place that has been recently burned, that's getting a lot of sunlight through the canopy, or in an old field scenario or some sort of native vegetation opening that is being managed frequently with fire. That's where that structure occurs. It isn't in the improved pasture grass that you've got for your cattle or whatever. You'll typically see hens with their poults around the edges of those things, and that's because that's where the plants that are providing that kind of structure, they're all relegated to the edges of most of our openings, and frankly don't exist that much in a lot of our forests.
Yeah, would you say too, Marcus, that another benefit is, and I don't do it for this, I think, but there's so many converging reasons why I love the burn. Much less, I just love what it does to the land. But wouldn't you say there's a higher chance of better quality, like forage and bugs and even the tender sprouts, for a hen to have better nutrition and be in better shape to nest? And I mean, I've learned that too. If they're in better nutritional health condition, they have a much better chance of having more eggs and more successful flights, don't you think?
Oh yeah, there's no question about that, and that's what people really need to think about when we're talking about using a practice like fire to enhance habitat. That has a cumulative effect on the animal's biology throughout its life, and that applies at every life stage. And when you start adding up all those percentages, it starts to have a real big impact on the population, even though it may be 1% here and there over the lifespan of that population, those individuals. That can add up really quickly. And when you're addressing habitat concerns and providing high quality nutrition, the hens are in better condition, potentially have better conditions or better choices to nest in. Their nest is harder to find. They potentially lay more eggs and are more successful, and then poults are more. I mean, we can just add it up. Those things really start to turn into big changes in the amount of turkeys that make it to adults. And you just don't get that if you focus on other things. Now, you can do other things to supplement that, but, addressing habitat with practice like fire in particular for turkeys, that has this cumulative effect. It's addressing all of the issues, the nutrition, the predation, you're addressing everything all at once. And, that's why we really commonly are screaming that from the rooftops, right? It's, using these practices can have all of these different positive benefits on several of the species that we want to manage all at once. And we can manipulate fire in different ways to target some of those things, but we generally can address many issues with several species at the same time.
Hey, Marcus, I'm going to jump in here real quick. Lanny is just waving his hand over here. He's got a question. So let's see what he's got.
Yeah. Well, I think I guess an observation from being around, and seeing fire, specifically in the Southeast for years is look, I love turkeys and I love wildlife. Obviously, I think more than most people, but one of the coolest thing about fire is what I would call the exponential factor of it. So can you speak a little bit to maybe what fire can do for timber stand improvement or, other benefits, because there just seems to be so many.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that I love fire, and it's fun. It's that practice. It's just fun to implement once you get the experience to go and do that safely. Man, it's just fun to do. A lot of people that I work with have gotten to that point where they're doing that as their pastime. So that's one benefit. Another thing that I think Toxie said earlier was the aesthetics of it. There's a lot of aesthetically pleasing traits about a recently burned open pine stand. It just looks pretty. A lot of flowering things. The same thing with your prairie grasses or whatever. There's a lot of aesthetic value. There can be some financial value if you're using it, particularly in pines, to enhance growth. And then what I think about the majority of the time is how many different ways it can influence positively for the species we want, the habitat. And the things that you generally are going to expect to occur following fires, providing there's enough sunlight reaching the forest floor, is you generally increase the carrying capacity for deer substantially. So that's a nutritional benefit. Another thing that can influence is how likely a fawn is to make it through predation. That reduces risk. We have a couple of studies now to indicate that. Another thing, sort of adding on to that cumulative effect, just thinking about deer, the most nutritionally demanding life stage of the animal is in the female when she's lactating to feed that deer, the fawn. So we're also enhancing, at the same time that we're enhancing fawning cover, we're also providing better nutrition, which allows her to more easily feed it. So, we have this cumulative effect. It also can be timed really well to coincide with antler growth so that bucks can reach peak antler characteristics. So we have this cumulative effect that you could have on deer in that way. With turkeys, we have a very similar effect where you tend to get more high-quality forbs that can enhance nutrition from vegetation. Those also lead typically to more seeds and more insects that are available. That can be particularly important for that brood that is growing really rapidly and needs high protein. So we see those same cumulative effects. And of course, we've already talked about the improved nesting success and the improved survival of poults from predation as well that come along with that improved structure. It's very similar. We might slightly tweak the way that we use fire, but it's very similar in the cumulative effects that it can have on quail. And it's they're even more sensitive to it because some of their life stages are much more sensitive to the structure in particular that comes with frequent fire.
And it kills ticks.
Was that a good summary?
Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah.
And it kills ticks.
Okay.
I mean, why would you not want to be burning?
Oh my God. Yeah. The red meat allergy thing that popped up with
set the
ticks
world on fire.
Really got me.
Right, yeah.
Oh my gosh. That thing got me worried because if I got red meat allergy, that'd be devastating to my career, my diet,
everything,
my lifestyle, my pastime. I mean, we're just talking, talking about cumulative effects, that'd
Train
be
wreck.
devastating.
Yeah, you'd have to pick up another hobby like golf or something.
Yeah, like what else am I going to do? So, that's something in it. Yeah.
So, Margaret,
that's something that I've worked on because of that is looking at even variation in the timing of fire within the year can have substantially different effects on the tick abundance in the landscape. So that's really interesting.
It is.
That's kind of leading to one of my questions, which is, I'm gonna let's just say you're in a big hunting camp, and traditionally, burning has kind of come back into popularity. I would say in the last 20 years with private landowners. They've been doing it on public for a while, but it seems like it's all centered around the end of January and February, and that's it. Well, we all know that before we came over here, maybe even before the natives were burning, burns happened year round. So if you were to say, put it in ratio form or percentage, how would you burn if you were, focusing on deer and turkey, but overall diversity? What time of year would you be burning your place? Like, would you do 60% of it in January and February and March, and 40 in the summer? How would you do that?
That's a great question. The way I normally think about it is wait for a good burn day and then burn on that one.
Okay.
Distribute them through the year that way, and you'll end up being really diverse and it'll even change from year to year because you'll have some years where you'll have a little patch of good weather at different times of the year, and that gets you away from that model where you kind of paint yourself into a corner where if you don't get a couple of good burn days during the window you've set, then you don't do it at all. And I think that's important, and exactly what you're saying is true. Nature burned stuff extremely variably in comparison to the way that we do it. I actually have just recently done a research project on this, looking at when lightning set fires occurred versus when we actually pull permits and burn in the southeastern states. And there's about a 3-month difference in the peak. And it actually peaks in the 2 months it peaks in for prescribed burning when we pull permits is February and March, and then that is June and July for lightning set fires, and I think it was 12 states that I looked over the past 30 years. So that's one thing to think about, is when nature was burning things is not when we typically do, and there are some reasons why we might want to think about that. The other thing to think about is I just gave you the peak and did not even mention the variation associated with that peak. So, Dudley, what you were saying is exactly right. That peak is about 30% of the fires occur during that 2-month window, or maybe 40%. I can't remember the number exactly, but not even half of it occurs in that 2-month window. And then a huge variation associated with that, where a lot of lightning generated fires occurring later than June or July in the year, and a lot of it is occurring before that. So, we have several other months where there's a lot of fire occurring naturally, and it did historically. And the same thing is true for the prescribed burning. The difference is the mean is shifted that 3 months. So you see that same sort of, if you think of it like a bell-shaped curve, if anybody's, I don't want to bring up statistics for any other reason, but if you've ever taken a stats class and you saw that normal distribution, it sort of looks like that with the distribution of fires. But, ours are centered on February and March, and then we burn some a few months before that and a few months after that, but it kind of fizzles out. So what I would prefer to do is kind of take both of those into consideration and just think about, okay, what do I want to accomplish? And then let's strategize by moving around on the landscape to where I can accomplish that based on the timing that will best accomplish it. And what you end up with is you always have something to burn for some reason that meets your objectives, and that'll give you a lot more burn days to get a lot of that accomplished.
I like it. It just seems like, February and early March seems to be the most convenient time to do it. There's not a bunch of tall weeds and stuff everywhere. It's not really hot, but it just makes you wonder, the plant communities that come back after a burn are going to be different when you burn all the time in February versus burning, some in the summer as well. And it only makes sense to change it up a little bit. And
I think you're right on point.
Burning every year in February is far better than not burning at all for most of us.
Yeah,
but
that's it. You're exactly right. If you can't do it any other time, then there's nothing wrong with that timing. And that big old gobbler that we're trying to find, he's going to be strutting in the area that was just burned, within the last month. So there are benefits that you gain from that you wouldn't gain from other times of the year. But you're right on point. The diversity is key, and it's because you're trying to provide several different things to the species of interest, and in many cases you're trying to provide several different things to many species of interest, right? So the best way to do that is to mix things up, and there's not you really can effectively manage the plant community structure with fire that's in February and March, and just never doing anything other than that. You can maintain the structure that's desirable really well with that. What you really gain from moving to other times of the year for these species, or you can target some specific nutritional demands of animals, and also you can shift the plant community in terms of the composition. So which plants are actually sprouting, you can shift it to more desirable ones often if you move to later in the growing season.
Gotcha.
So Marcus, will you explain, what is a good burning day, and then go into wind direction and how important that is?
Humidity.
And just so we'll understand that.
Sure. Yeah. I get asked this a lot, and I hate to put parameters on it because it often limits people, but I'll give you some general things to think about. The primary weather conditions that you want to plan around are relative humidity, wind speed, and temperature, and mixing height. So those things are all important, and typically we'd be looking at. Now, there's some other factors that folks look into that can be really important, but those are the typical ones. And most of the time with relative humidity, we're somewhere in between 30 and 50%. That can vary a lot depending on where you're burning and what kind of substrate it is. So in some systems, you might need to get below 30 before it'll even carry a fire. And in other ones, you're not going to be able to keep it inside your fire break if it's down below 30, like it's getting unsafe to contain. So, I'm kind of giving those as loose guidelines because of that, but somewhere in that 30 to 50 is generally where we're doing most of the burning in terms of relative humidity. In terms of, let's see, what else did I say? The wind speed, that can vary as well, just like everything else. I hate saying it depends, but it always does. But most of the time, most prescriptions are going to be somewhere in the, on the really low end, we'd be at 2 or 3 miles per hour, but on the high end, we're more like 15 miles per hour. There's some situations you might want a stronger wind than that, but generally we're somewhere in that range. 5 to 10 is a pretty good thing to target most of the time in most systems and for most objectives. That being said, I have burned in loblolly stands that had been thinned in June when we were down in the 3 to 5 mile an hour range, and that thing just kind of petered around through the stands and moved really slow. It took a long time, but man, it was safe. We didn't injure any trees, and it was really effective at controlling the mid-story hardwoods, particularly sweet gum. I was pretty surprised with it. It was a real low-intensity meandering fire. So, so wind speed, definitely something that you want to consider. Obviously, when you're going through the process of getting the permit, so you do that through the State Forest Service, wherever you're at, what you're really getting a permit for is the smoke. And that's where the wind direction can be really important, because the smoke is what is guaranteed to leave the site. And you need to make sure that, you're setting up things so that your smoke is going somewhere that's not going to cause a problem. So, that's important. The same thing with the mixing height and transport winds. We're trying to get that smoke up into the atmosphere and out to dissipate, so that it's not causing any problems. And generally, we're trying to get that above like a 1,700, 1,800 feet mixing height. So that'd be another kind of general thing, and that can vary some depending on where you're at and what the ramification or what's around you and what you're having to burn and all that sort of stuff. So, but those are some general guidelines. That varies, like I've said, and there are resources wherever the listeners are at. You have information that's more local to you wherever you're at, that's available on particularly the State Forest Service Agency's website. They'll have some good stuff on this.
Well,
hey Marcus, I might want to mention, because I think at least one of my sons or both of them, I actually have never done it. I've been burning for 20 plus years, and been around a lot of, even people that taught burning classes and have learned by osmosis, and I only burn on my own property. But I would highly recommend people listening to this that have any interest at all, look up and go to the nearest, it's like a one-day workshop, and I think they're really, really good. I know Mississippi State has one coming up soon, but they have them all over Alabama and all over Mississippi, I say all over, in most regions. And I know, I'm sure Florida does some. I know Mississippi State does some, but I feel like you could look that up and easily schedule and go to one. I think anybody who's really, really interested should go to one, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, you're right on point. There is training available, and I highly recommend anybody that's interested going. I mean, frankly, the information is really interesting. You get to learn a lot about all this stuff, and you can use that to decide whether or not you want to move further. But you're also learning how to get all the approvals that you need and go through the whole process, and what conditions you want to burn in, and getting some experience in some of the workshops. In Mississippi, they generally have them in Starkville and Hattiesburg, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
So they kind of rotate between those two, and I think they do them 2 times a year in Mississippi, where they'll be like in early March and then maybe in August or September. So they're readily available to folks in both parts of the state if we just cut it in half.
If you're going to burn on somebody's property that you don't own, you have to have the permit, right?
That's a good question. I'm not sure how theirs is structured, but in general, just kind of a more broad sweeping statement across several states, you generally need to have, and it's a good idea to have a prescribed fire manager on site, and to have a permit, which you would call the state agency and get. And on the day of the burn, or in some cases the day before is okay, and then you would have a prescription that you've written that lists the parameters for which you're going to burn under for a given area that you're proposing to burn on that day. And as long as you have, and I think you've got to get that notarized, but as long as you have those things, they actually afford you, in many states, some protections in case stuff happens. I mean, it's obvious that it's inherently dangerous to burn stuff. I mean, fire is inherently dangerous, but it's also recognized that it's for the common good, and because of that, many states have some sort of legislation to help protect you, as long as you're doing your due diligence to get all these things in order.
Any place you're thinking about, I mean, you should sit down and make a list of those issues and what it takes for that to be 100% safe, without question. All the variables we talked about, the fire breaks, the understory, the wind direction, especially, the humidity, and it's what I'm just getting at is if it does not meet those criteria, don't get so antsy and try it anyway. Do not burn unless you have everything, all your homework done ahead of time.
Yeah, and that's a nice thing about that prescription. And the point is you have a stand that you've already planned. Okay, this is the range of conditions that I can do this safely in this place. And as long as you're within that and you've gotten that approved, then you're doing your due diligence to apply prescribed fire safely. I think this is the part, especially the legal part of it. It scares a lot of people, and that's a barrier to getting this practice more widely used. But most people don't realize, and if you go and take one of these trainings, it'll become more obvious to you. But you do have some protections because it is viewed as a practice that's for the common good, because it's such an important practice in our landscape.
Yeah, that's tough when for example, maybe you're leasing property and the landowner is scared of fire. I've heard of folks having trouble with that, and I've also heard some solution is to just see if the landowner will let you do a half-acre spot in a very safe area, and just slowly work your way towards them trusting you more. And then if you let the landowner know of the benefits, that it's going to help their land improve the recreational value and the probably the timber value someday. It's a win-win. It's unfortunate that some states seem to be more prohibitive. I'm not sure which those are, but I'll talk to people on the phone from time to time, and they'll be like, "Well, my state DNR kind of frowns on burning," and I hate that. Hopefully, we can press our legislatures and
So, Marcus, a couple of quick questions from my end. Is there some gear, gear that you would recommend that everybody have? Is it some special safety gear or anything? We want to make sure everybody has what they need.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things related to that. There are a bunch of tools that are a good idea to have, and some that are almost necessary that the average person can afford to just have around. So first thing would be some sort of protective clothing, and I'm talking about something that you could get a fire retardant clothing like Nomex. A lot of the folks that do a lot of prescribed burning will say you get yellered up. Well, they're talking about that. The Nomex shirt is generally yellow, so that's a piece of protective clothing that's designed for use of fire or wearing when you're around fire. That normally that's a more specialized thing. A lot of these things are, I guess, that you might get from forestry suppliers or a place like that has some more forestry specific supplies. So that clothing is a good idea. Having a good pair of leather gloves is a good idea to protect your hands, of course, and footwear, same thing. In terms of hand tools, drip torch, that's one that is extremely useful. You can accomplish burning without it, but it's worth it to go ahead and spend $100 or $200 to get a couple of good drip torches.
And while you're there,
100%.
And what is
absolutely?
What is the ratio? How do you mix diesel and gasoline? What's the ratio there?
Yeah. Well, it depends again. So that would range somewhere between 30% of gasoline to 50%. And when you get to 50%, it's starting to get really volatile, and that's what it would be, a really hot torch. And some people like it to be a little on the hot end. If you add more gasoline than that, you start getting into some problems where the drip torch might spit, or it might actually go out before it gets to the ground. Those kinds of issues can pop up. And if you get less gasoline than 30%, then you start having a little more problems with getting it to ignite. So somewhere in between those, I generally am about at a 40-60 ratio personally. So in terms of some of the other tools, of course, the drip torch, but also having a fire swatter, that's a good idea. A shovel, there's a couple of things like a shovel, fire rake, that you might already have something that'll work around the house that you're using for yard work. Having an axe or a chainsaw could be a good idea. In terms of some of the equipment, I guess power equipment, it's a good idea to have a source of water. So you may already have a sprayer that you could adapt to use that, or there are some types that you can fit on an ATV or a truck that's getting a little more expensive, or you can actually buy a water truck, and generally those are really expensive, and most people don't have that unless they are in some sort of cooperative, like a prescribed burn association, where they're sharing that cost amongst a bunch of people, which can be a really effective way to get experience and have that kind of equipment available to you as well. So, those are some general things that's a really good idea to have. A blower can be really effective, especially if you have a place where you need to put in a mineral soil fire break, but you can't get a tractor or ATV, or it's less convenient to do that. The blower might be really helpful in those cases.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So those are, some things, several of those, you might already have something that'll work around the house, but having those kinds of things on hand and having a person, you generally don't want to be doing this by yourself. So if you have a few other people with you, then we can all be assigned one of the tools.
Yeah, you want a Lanny with you, is what
around.
you want.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
You don't buy some fires.
it'll wear you out, So when you mentioned water, you also need to bring water to drink. And anything you
That's
wear,
right.
be prepared for it to get torn up. I always wear some older boots, you getting all that diesel and soot and, So
and sometimes you'll just set your boot on fire,
But
so.
and you've always got
Don't
that
want-
guy that shows up with a bunch of synthetic clothes and rubber boots on and stuff, and that's not good,
Yeah, you definitely, if you don't get Nomex, having wool or cotton, if you have to, those are better than some of these other synthetic clothing.
I was just going to say it's very active, so be prepared to be kind of running around and wear appropriate clothing.
Yeah,
Well, and that becomes less convenient when it's during the summer, which is one reason we don't burn that much then, right? Because,
Sure.
In Mississippi, it's going to be 98 degrees. You don't want to be wearing all that mess.
So I had a pair of Bobby's great design on his new, briar pants. He loves to wear stuff like that. It looks like he's been quail hunting. I don't recommend those because those are nylon face, and I burnt the front of them off of the first pair. I mean, I hadn't even worn them but one time, and I singed the front of them. So don't try those. One other little thing I would y'all mentioned already: don't wear rubber boots. Pretty much don't wear rubber boots. You can melt the bottom off of it, stomping out a little grass spot. But something y'all haven't mentioned, and a lot of people will use, like the ATV is very useful, especially if you have something on there to hang your drip torch on and all. But do not ever cut across. I know people, and I know you do it, Marcus, will lay a fire down, or they have somebody sitting on the back of the ATV laying a fire line down. Don't ever cut across through the woods doing that, because if anything happens to your four-wheeler and it shuts down or something happens, you have whatever, a fuel filter stops up, anything could go wrong. You're going to lose that four-wheeler. You're going to have to end up, it'll blow up, So always stay on a road and don't try to cut across through the woods on your 4-wheeler.
Is that
while a fire's burning?
is that
one on the 4-wheeler? Because I've known a couple people that blown 4-wheelers up or had to run them off in a lake to save them. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that
I
from
have
personal
seen
experience?
a bunch of burned up ones too.
Yeah.
That sounded like maybe that was the way you're saying, Dudley, the voice of experience there.
Yeah, exactly. Have you ever burned a 4-wheeler up, Toxie?
I have not because I heard enough stories. I've always been very spooked about getting across. So no, not even close. Thank goodness. But I know, and actually I know some people that Scott knows that ran one off in a lake. You know, because especially when you're dealing with grass fires and wind chips, you can get it. I mean, you might think you're in great shape, and that wind chips, and you know those wind chips, especially the thermals around a hot fire, will change, and you might have 10 minutes of the fire blowing the exact opposite direction of what you got predicted that day. So you just, especially around grass fires with that kind of fuel, you need to be really careful.
Yeah, it's important to be scared of fire when you're doing this. You can
a
get
healthy appreciation of fear. Yeah,
you can get overconfident after you've been doing it a few years and really mess up. And I'd like to pitch a little story just to prove my point that it is important to be scared of it. My buddy Jack and I were burning and actually in Yazoo County one day, and we thought we had contained it and decided to move on to another little island of pines and light that fire. And we were there for a couple hours working it, and we're like, gosh, we're tired. We got that fire burned down. Let's go back to the house and get something to eat and something to drink. We come back to the house, and the previous a pine that had been butt scarred by some equipment years ago, there was sap all over the side of it. It was on the line of fire where we started it. Well, all that exposed wood and sap caught fire. The pine burned through and then fell over across the fire lane and got into some dead Bermuda grass, went underneath and like an agricultural diesel tank that had 500 gallons of diesel in it, underneath 2 vehicles, and then burned up to the slab of the house. And it's only by the grace of God that something really bad didn't happen. And so things...
It was enough to scare you.
Right. So it is important to be paranoid. And just think about the worst case scenario before you light that fire, and wait until it's completely out before you move on.
That's why it's great to have extra people. So somebody is continuing. You know, if you'd had a third or fourth person, maybe that one stays back and keeps checking and keeps checking and keeps checking. I know when we set fires on some of our safest places possible, 60% of the border, because the way it curves, is a river. I mean, it's so safe, but we go back and keep going back and keep going back and keep going back, checking it again and again and again until it's gotten way off of the fire lanes and everything.
Having a healthy fear where it doesn't keep you from accomplishing your objectives, but it keeps you safe. That's where you want to be, is in between those.
Indeed.
The people I know that have gotten in trouble, and I don't know many, but I know a couple, have all been like really cocky. I know what I'm doing. I've done this a million times, and they just weren't safe, and they got a little bit, for lack of a better word, cocky. Burning is no place for that.
Well, guys,
talking about, one other thing, talking about something that kind of resonates with me that is sort of similar to the story that Dudley was telling is, one of the things that opened my eyes is I went back to check on a fire after the sun went down, and particularly those snags, they'll be shooting embers, and of course you can see them when they're dark. Like you don't even realize how much stuff is going on in there that you may not even be aware of, which is the reason that you need to, continually check back and make sure that everything is going right.
That's right.
That's good. That's a really good point. Well, guys, this has been fascinating, and we've been talking for a while. I know Marcus has got the other things he needs to do, but does anybody else have any other questions? Lanny?
I'm good.
Yeah. Dudley?
No, that was pretty conclusive.
Toxie, you got anything else?
No, I mean, it just, the one thing overriding all of it, I just got off the subject, is the safety part. So, I encourage everybody to pick the right stuff that will really make a difference on your place and do it. But I mean, you might start small, and, a good idea, maybe the first time you do it, if you don't have some really good natural fire breaks like a lake or a creek, a big creek or something, pick a day where there's a forecasted steady wind from the same direction, not a high wind. And maybe where you have a built fire break of some type, go ahead and get a double fire break, and be super safe, because, with time, with experience, you learn, you get better, you get more comfortable at, what can go wrong, what can't go wrong. But if you've kind of planned ahead of time for the possibilities, you can mitigate any kind of danger stuff,
Yeah. Well,
don't take anything for granted.
Yeah. To add on to that, there are lots of opportunities for folks to get out and get some experience with other people that are really that have a lot of experience. Of course, we've talked about the training, but that was one of the things that I think I talked about last time. Is Alabama at that time was putting on a couple of learn and burns that I knew about. Those things are popping up and available all the time. And, folks are sharing about that on social media or on some of these websites we've talked about. There are opportunities for you to go and get some hands-on experience and start to get more comfortable, so that you don't have to feel like you need to start all from scratch by yourself at your own place.
Good point.
Yeah, it is. So, Dr. Marcus Lashley, you grew up in around Livingston, Alabama, which is one of our favorite places. So, I wanted to say, when you come back home this spring and you're there during turkey season, we would love to go turkey hunting with you.
Oh man, I would be all over that, and I will be there during turkey season.
We could even, Bobby, Are you inviting him, or are you inviting yourself?
No, I was inviting ourselves.
Well, when you're not in town, we could hunt your place just to make sure nobody else is hunting it.
Yeah, that's always good.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, probably won't find many around my place at the moment, but
good answer,
Marcus. I think a lot of you, and I just want to let you know, in the spirit of transparency, that you're talking to basically Russian KGB agents when it comes to turkey season. So trust no one.
Oh, Marcus.
I just assumed that.
Yeah.
I just assumed it.
That's a great assumption.
Well, look, we've certainly enjoyed having you, Marcus. I want to make sure people listening, if they don't know, they can follow you at Dr. Disturbance.
Yeah, Dr. Disturbance.
Okay, yep.
That's on all the social media platforms. And I also am the director of the UF Deer Lab, and we have the at UF Deer Lab handle as well.
So the University of Florida, there is a lot going on in the wildlife world down there, and
great school.
And I think Marcus is plugged into all of it, and it's all interrelated. The Mississippi State, Tennessee. Marcus has got a great. He's been all over. He's a super smart guy. We're just fortunate to get to be able to tap into you and have you on here from time to time, Marcus, and we're big fans.
Yeah.
And thanks for being here.
Likewise, I really appreciate y'all having me on the show. It's been a lot of fun, and looking forward to next time.
Marcus, we're sorry it took so long to get you, but we sure enjoyed having you on here, and we will do this again.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Thanks, Marcus.
All right.
I hope I see you. I hope I see you in the breakfast house somewhere in Livingston this spring, because I'll for sure be down there.
No doubt.
Okay, well, I'll definitely be there in March.
Make him buy you lunch, Marcus.
There you go.
Sounds like a good idea.
All right, good to see you.
Hey, that's a deal. That's a deal. See y'all.
See y'all.
Oh, I always enjoy talking to him. He's
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Real passionate.
Yeah.
And he's from here. I feel like we already know him.
But he seems so. I mean, he's so smart. He really is. You can tell. Listen to him, but he's very passionate about the disturbance ecology, I think is the way it's referred to.
Yeah, and he knows all the plants. My first experience with Marcus was he was a new professor here, and he had his class come to the nursery one day, and we walked around and looked at the nursery, and then we went out to the what's called the 16th section prairie, where a lot of professors lease this land because it's a very rare prairie. And we walked around, and he identified plants, and students were getting samples for their leaf collections and all that stuff. And I was really impressed with all the oddball grasses and other species he knew the name of.
Yeah, I bet he did. So, well, look, before we close out, we always like to say, what do we learn? And then there's so much in this one that whole the relative humidity thing. I was very curious about that, and I was surprised that it was as high as it was.
Mm-hmm. I was actually surprised it was that low. So,
oh really? Yeah. Is Toxie still on here?
Nope. Hung up.
Oh, we lost him. Okay. Well, so Dudley, was there something that stood out that he said that you? Kind of hard to teach you something else.
Yeah.
No, but I really enjoyed it, and I hope our listeners learned a lot. If you guys have any questions about what we talked about, don't hesitate to give us a shout or throw us an email.
Yeah, Lanny, did you have a?
Man, just fire. Every time, the more we learn about it, the more beneficial it is, not only to wildlife, but to timber, to biodiversity, what we're all after in the future. So don't be scared of it. It's a amazing tool. Be careful, obviously.
Yeah, do your homework.
Do your homework, but it's an amazing tool, amazingly fun, and amazingly efficient, too. So,
yeah, it is. It sure is. And it will beautify a place.
Yeah, it's nothing like a burned stand of pines.
It really is.
Especially in the spring.
So one of the things I wanted to mention, we're wrapping up, we're closing out, but guys, we really would appreciate y'all giving us a review, an honest review, if you like it or you don't like it or whatever. But I was going to point out, we had a review last week by a lady. And I didn't even know we had a lady listening to the podcast.
There's lady gamekeepers out there everywhere.
I
Brenda Valentine.
Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, she is. But this lady said, I'm not really a hunter anymore, and I am female, but I love this podcast. They make me LOL daily and amp. And Lane, I wanted to ask you, what is amp?
An amp.
It says they make me LOL daily and amp. I learn stuff being a landowner. Thank y'all. And her name was Dixie Bell. But I didn't know what amp meant.
I mean, I'm always amped up, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, these young kids have these new words. Like
I'm not young.
Sam told me the other day I was dripping, and I didn't know what that meant.
No, he's talking you're drip. Yeah.
I'm dripped. Oh,
no,
is that what
you're
was?
drip.
Oh, I'm drip. Yeah, I got confused on all that. So anyway, but Dixie, thank you. I'm going to send Dixie, if you would reach back out to us, we'll send you a levy sling, a Gamekeeper levy sling. And anybody that does a review, we'll call them out occasionally. Y'all, we'd appreciate that. So, look, I don't think there's anything else to say. You got anything, Lanny?
I alwa's got something to say, but that's enough today.
Well, we got a lot of cleaning up to do around here. There's a lot still left to do.
I'm moving on to your office next.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Dudley, what about you? Anything?
No.
Okay.
I'm ready to get back to the grind and say goodbye.
Yeah. All right. Well, say goodbye, Dudley.
Goodbye, Dudley.
Get us out of here, Richie.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Gamekeeper Podcast. And be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to Gamekeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine, and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.